What's up, guys? It's Brandon, and one of our heartbeats here at Brandon Williams Music is that we want to create safe places for people to tell their story. And so I thought, with this being Mental Health Month, that I would take an opportunity just to tell you my story and how I battle with depression. And let me just tell you, it's a messy story, but it's beautiful and it's mine, and so I own that. So let me just tell you. So right off the bat, I was kind of born with these three roadblocks, right, in regards to mental health. First off, I'm a man, and historically, men don't talk about mental health. Like we just need to, don't be sissies, don't be punks. We just push through that, right? Second, I'm black or African American, as you can probably see, right? And historically in black communities, mental health is something we don't talk about because we have so many other issues, so many other things that we are fighting for and fighting to change, that mental health just gets put on the back burner or swept under the rug. And then lastly, I'm a Christian, and there's this insidious lie in most Christian churches that if you're struggling with depression, it must mean that you don't have enough faith, right? We're just supposed to be happy all the time. And let me just say this, that is a lie. That is not accurate, that's not biblical. And we're actually gonna do a whole video just to talk about that because it's such a lie that's so prevalent in our churches, right? And so looking back, I kind of recognized that I had some really significant trauma that I went through, right? So by the time I was 15, I had been abused by an older friend. My mom had suffered a crazy asthma attack that put her in a coma, and thank God that he brought her out of that. My mom is one of the strongest women that I know. She had to learn how to walk all over again, talk all over again, do all that, and still raise a hard-headed high school boy, right? I had moved from California to Texas, like left behind all my friends, all my community, everything that I had known to come to Texas, which I didn't know anything about Texas, right? I thought everybody was riding tractors through the street, which is not accurate at all, but I didn't know, I was a kid. And then lastly, my best friend died in a car wreck when I was young, and that was really hard for me. And so right off the bat, I had some significant trauma, and so by the time I got to high school, like it played itself out in some crazy ways. Like I was already doing self-harm, like cutting myself, like I was depressed all of the time. I was fighting with my parents. I was running away from home. And then like I always had this feeling in my gut that like God was gonna like kill me in my sleep. So I was terrified of going to sleep. And that's not something that anybody should be thinking about, much less a high school kid. Like the only things I should be worried about is getting a date for prom and passing my SAT, right? And so that was high school for me. And the crazy thing is, if you would have known me in high school, you would have no idea. Because I've always been super personable. I've always been like a friendly guy, so nobody knew who I was struggling with. And man, thank God that I had really loving parents who fought for me and who held on to me, who would not let me go even through my darkest seasons. They're the only reason why I made it through high school. They're the only reason why, a big part of the reason why I'm the man who I am today. But even with that, like they didn't know the full extent of what I was going through because I didn't even know the full extent of what I was going through. Like I didn't even know how to express a lot of the stuff that I was going through, right? And so I did make it through high school. I made it through by the skin of my teeth. And kind of it all came to head a while back. I was working as a worship leader at a church. I had my own car, had my own apartment, like thought I was doing hot stuff. I was relatively healthy, right? There came a season where I dated this girl. We went on like 2 dates. It ended, it was fine. We were amicable, like we were still friends, like everything was good. But I started noticing that like people in the church started treating me differently, right? They just stopped talking to me. Like it always, like you can kind of feel that tension of where you feel like people are talking about you. Like there was just this tension there that I didn't know how to deal with, right? And nobody came and talked to me. Nobody was like, hey, what's up with this? What's going on with this, right? And so I was just kind of suffering in silence. And I started seeing myself kind of slip into this depression. Like I wasn't sleeping at all. I was eating really poorly. I wasn't talking to anybody. It got so bad that like when I got to work, like I would literally go to the front door and just to make a beeline to my office and wouldn't talk to anybody, wouldn't deal with anybody, right? Because I didn't know how to cope with this. And in that season, all I really wanted was for somebody to come up to me and say, hey, what's going on? Are you okay, right? But that didn't happen. And let me say this first off, like I don't have any ill will towards anybody. We are all just broken people trying to figure out how to do this. So we need to have grace for ourselves and grace with other people, right? Forgiveness is key in all situations. So So moving on, it got so bad to the point where I just said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. And so I felt like I had nothing to live for. So I made the decision that I was going to take my own life. And so I remember getting home, and I had this tow rope in the back of my car. And so I got that tow rope out, went in my house, tied it around the ceiling fan, and stepped up on this chair, and I was ready to go. Like, I was ready to just get it over with. And the only thing that saved me that night was I felt like God was telling me, hey, there's more to your story. There's more to your story. It's not over yet. It's not over yet, right? Now, here's what I need you to see in this. I didn't write a letter. Like, there was no letter. I didn't write a long Facebook post. I didn't text anybody. I didn't call anybody. Nobody would have known what happened to me until they found me, right? Like, crazy to say. My own parents wouldn't have known until they found me. But that night, like, that voice in me to saying, hey, your story's not over yet, was what saved me. And I remember getting off that chair and going to the shower and just crying and weeping. And then getting up the next day, going to work like nothing happened. And for a while, I didn't tell anybody this story. I think my wife was actually the first person to know actually the depths of kind of what I went through in that season. And let me say this. Since then, man, it's been a crazy road, and it's been hard. It's been hard kind of wrestling with this. But God has been so gracious to bring people in my life who get to know me intimately and want to know me. And so when there's something wrong, they can call that out and they can speak to that. My wife is really good at that. And she's like, hey, what's going on? Like, you seem different. Like, do you just need some space? Like, I'll just sit here with you if that's what you need. And that's been super, super powerful and life-saving for me. So fast forward to now, and let me tell you that my life is drastically different. I've married the woman of my dreams. I have a beautiful daughter who is 3 months, going on 4 months. I have a credible job where I get to kind of live out my passions and my goals, and I get to create. Like, I love my life. But that would not have been possible if God hadn't changed the course of my life that night. And so let me tell you this, that depression, anxiety, their only goal is to steal your future. That's it. It's to steal your identity, to steal who you are so you don't have a future. And if I would have listened to those voices of shame and hurt, I would not be here today. And so let me say this. If you are someone who is struggling with mental health, let me tell you, one, you're not alone. Two, that there is help and there is hope. Right? Like, there is hope. There are people, there are organizations who this is all that they deal with. And it's not a shameful thing to struggle. It's not a shameful thing to struggle. But the most courageous thing that we can do as people who struggle is just to tell our story, just to be open and say, hey, I need some help, and that's okay. Now, for those of you who don't struggle in this way, what I would say is help us by creating a safe place where we can tell that story. There might be people in your churches, at your job, at wherever, who are just suffering in silence and who just need somebody to go up to them and say, hey, dude, are you okay? What's going on? Right? What's the deal with you? How can I help you? How can I love on you? Sometimes that's the most powerful thing, to just have somebody say, hey, how are you doing? And not just as a passing thing, but as a real, how are you doing? How can I help? So that is my story. That's an entire... as crazy and as whatever as it is, but that's my story. And I want to encourage you to tell your story. Like, TJ and I would love to hear your stories. And so it could be about anything, the messy, the beautiful, whatever. Like, we want you to you can either put your story up on social media and tag us in it, or you can DM us your stories, because we want to stand with you in whatever you're going through. And any resources that we can provide, we want to do that, because this is a fight that we are crazy passionate about, and we are passionate about people. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to my story. And man, I'm just praying that you would have the courage to tell your own story. Love you guys.